The diplomatic channel between Earth and the Vex Empire had been open for 312 days. It represented the first formal negotiations between humanity and the largest militaristic empire in the known galaxy. Earth's lead negotiator, Ambassador Sarah Chen, had been working toward this moment for years. The Vex Empire was a civilization built on military dominance and absolute hierarchy. They respected only strength. They negotiated only from positions of power. They had conquered 17 star systems through force and maintained control through absolute psychological dominance. The negotiations had been proceeding with careful, meticulous diplomacy. Chen had been attempting to establish mutual recognition of boundaries, resource sharing agreements, and basic protocols for nonviolent interaction between human space and Vex space. It was slow progress. But it was progress. Until 7:47 hours on day 312, when the diplomatic channel went silent. The sudden disconnection of the diplomatic channel triggered immediate alert protocols. The Vex communication team reported that their end was also experiencing the disconnection. It was not a technical failure. Both sides had verified that their systems were functioning perfectly. The channel had simply gone dead. Commander Alexandra Park, monitoring the negotiations from Earth's command center, understood that the disconnection was significant. In diplomatic protocol, an unexpected channel failure could signal multiple things: technical emergency, political crisis, or worse, military mobilization. Park activated emergency communication protocols to attempt re-establishment of contact with the Vex. The response came back: no communication available. The Vex diplomatic corps did not answer. The Vex military command did not respond. The entire Vex communication network appeared to be offline. 7 minutes of complete silence. In those 7 minutes, Earth's military mobilized. Defensive systems were activated. Shield generators powered up. Every ship in human space went to combat readiness. Everyone understood that 7 minutes of communication silence from the Vex could precede a military assault. The reactivation at 7:54 hours, exactly 7 minutes after the initial disconnection, the diplomatic channel reactivated. But instead of the voice of the Vex diplomatic representative, Ambassador Chen heard something unexpected. She heard weeping. The sound of beings crying, multiple voices, layered over each other, in a way that suggested millions of voices simultaneously expressing grief, shock, and disbelief. Ambassador Chen waited, uncertain how to respond to this unprecedented situation. Then the voice of Emperor Vortok himself came through the channel. The Emperor speaks. Emperor Vortok's voice was different from how it had sounded in all previous diplomatic exchanges. It had been hard, commanding, absolutely certain. Now it carried something that Vortok should not have been capable of expressing: uncertainty. Ambassador Chen, Vortok said, his voice unsteady. I am transmitting something to you. Something that the Vex Empire has hidden from the broader galaxy for 4,000 years. Something that I am compelled by conscience to reveal now that I have been forced to understand its truth. The transmission began. It was a video record, extremely old, dated to approximately 4,000 years prior. It showed a Vex military campaign against a peaceful species in the Kepler region. The video documented the systematic destruction of that civilization, the bombardment of planets, the elimination of populations, the conquest of resources. But more disturbingly, the video showed something that the official Vex history had never acknowledged: that the species being destroyed had been peaceful. They had been non-militaristic. They had been attempting to negotiate rather than fight. And the Vex had destroyed them anyway. The video continued, showing not just this campaign but 147 others over the 4,000-year history of the Vex Empire. Each campaign involved the destruction of peaceful civilizations. Each campaign was justified in the official Vex historical records as necessary military operations against threatening enemies. But the video documentation showed the truth: they were all genocides. The revelations source. As the transmission continued, Emperor Vortok explained what had occurred during those 7 minutes of silence. During your diplomatic negotiations with us, you exposed information about human history, Vortok explained. You discussed how humanity had faced near extinction multiple times, how humans had survived through adaptation rather than dominance. You presented philosophy about coexistence rather than conquest. He paused. One of my advisors, studying your transmissions, performed an analysis of our own historical records using the same framework you presented. The analysis revealed something that we had been trained from birth to ignore, that our 4,000-year history is built on genocide. Vortok's voice became even more strained. I ordered the entire Vex Empire to face this truth simultaneously. I activated historical records that had been sealed for millennia. I transmitted documentation of every campaign, every genocide, every peaceful civilization we destroyed. I forced my people, 300 billion beings, to understand what we have actually been doing in the name of empire building. The sound of weeping continued in the background. The 7 minutes of silence was not military preparation. It was the moment when the Vex Empire, as a unified civilization, learned that it was built on atrocity. The Empire kneels. The next transmission from the Vex showed something unprecedented in the galaxy, a military empire bowing in submission. Not to an external enemy. Not to a conquering force. To themselves. To their own conscience. The video showed Emperor Vortok kneeling. Followed by his entire court. Followed by his military command structure. Followed, in cascading waves of simultaneous transmission, by the leadership of every Vex colony, every Vex military installation, every Vex administrative center across their territory. 300 billion beings knelt as the reality of their civilization's atrocities was acknowledged. Emperor Vortok transmitted a final statement to Ambassador Chen: the Vex Empire, as constituted, cannot continue to exist. We cannot maintain the institutions and hierarchies that have perpetuated genocide for 4,000 years. We are dissolving the empire. We are surrendering to the conclave all conquered territories. We are submitting ourselves to whatever justice the broader galaxy determines is appropriate for our atrocities. He paused. This dissolution occurs because of what you showed us about humanity. You showed us that civilizations can face near extinction and choose adaptation and coexistence rather than dominance. You inspired us to examine ourselves. And in examining ourselves, we discovered that we could no longer be what we have been. The galactic shock. The revelation that the Vex Empire had voluntarily dissolved itself triggered shockwaves across the galaxy. The largest military power in known space, which had conquered 17 star systems and maintained absolute dominance in its region for 4,000 years, had simply surrendered. Not to military pressure. Not to external threat. To internal conscience. The Conclave Assembly convened an emergency session to address the situation. Every species in known space was attempting to understand what had occurred. The documentation of the 147 genocides was examined by independent analysts. The evidence was overwhelming. The Vex had been engaged in systematic destruction of peaceful civilizations for millennia, classified and hidden as legitimate military campaigns. The question that the galaxy faced was not whether the Vex were guilty. The question was what justice looked like for atrocities on that scale. The unexpected outcome, what emerged from the conclave's deliberation, was something that no legal precedent had prepared them for. The Vex, by voluntarily acknowledging their atrocities and dissolving their own empire, had done something that the galaxy considered equivalent to accepting responsibility. Sentences were issued. Reparations were ordered. The territories conquered by the Vex were distributed back to the species that had originally inhabited them. The Vex military was disarmed. But because the Vex had voluntarily submitted rather than resisting, the sentences were considerably lighter than they might have been if the Conclave had been forced to impose justice by military conquest. The Vex Empire ceased to exist as a unified political entity. What emerged in its place was something unprecedented: a federation of Vex colonies, each smaller than before, each operating under strict conclave oversight, each dedicated to making reparations to the species they had destroyed. The human influence in historical analyses conducted in the centuries following the Vex dissolution, scholars repeatedly examined the question: what specifically about human diplomacy and human philosophy caused the Vex to transform so dramatically? The analysis suggested that it was not any single moment or statement. It was the combination of human examples of civilizations facing extinction and choosing adaptation, human philosophy about coexistence rather than dominance, human acknowledgement that peaceful existence was not a sign of weakness but of strength, human recognition that consciousness could develop and change. Humans had not defeated the Vex militarily. Humans had defeated the Vex philosophically. In 7 minutes of silence, the greatest military empire in the galaxy had transformed from a civilization of conquest to a civilization attempting redemption. The individual stories over the centuries that followed the Vex dissolution, individual stories emerged of Vex beings grappling with the knowledge of what their civilization had done. Some Vex committed themselves absolutely to reparation, spending their entire lives attempting to restore what had been destroyed. Some Vex found the knowledge so devastating that they could not continue existing. Some Vex became philosophical teachers, attempting to understand how a civilization could commit such atrocities while believing itself to be righteous. The Vex, as a species, underwent a transformation that was less military conquest and more like psychological transformation. They became a civilization defined not by what they had done, but by their commitment to understanding what they had done and preventing its recurrence. Emperor Vortok's final recording in his final years, after having overseen the complete dissolution of the Vex Empire he had once commanded, Emperor Vortok recorded his reflections: "I spent 480 years as the undisputed ruler of the Vex Empire. I believed I was maintaining order, expanding our civilization, demonstrating Vex superiority. I was actually orchestrating the systematic destruction of peaceful beings." He paused, the weight of that recognition visible. "I did not change because I was defeated militarily. I did not change because I was conquered. I changed because I was forced to understand the truth. And in understanding the truth, I became incapable of maintaining the lies that the Vex had been built upon." Vortok looked directly at the camera. "Ambassador Chen and humanity did not destroy the Vex Empire. Humanity inspired the Vex Empire to destroy itself by showing us that there were alternatives to conquest and dominance. In 7 minutes of knowledge, the Vex chose to voluntarily end 4,000 years of civilization because we finally understood what that civilization had cost." He concluded with words that would echo through galactic history: "The greatest power is not the power to conquer. The greatest power is the power to compel a civilization to understand itself. And the greatest mercy is not the mercy shown to the defeated, but the mercy shown to those who choose to face their own atrocities." The philosophical transformation, the voluntary dissolution of the Vex Empire, triggered a broader philosophical transformation across the galaxy. Species that had been engaged in their own forms of expansionism and conquest suddenly began to question whether their expansion was justified. Species that had hidden historical atrocities began cautiously considering whether revelation and reparation might be preferable to continued deception. The Vex transformation suggested that even civilizations built on atrocity could change. It suggested that conscience could overcome millennia of conditioning. It suggested that understanding was more powerful than force. The galaxy began a slow transformation toward reconciliation rather than continued conflict. The unexpected recognition: 50 years after the Vex Empire dissolved, the Conclave formally recognized the role that humanity had played in inspiring the Vex transformation. The recognition stated, "The human civilization did not defeat the Vex Empire militarily. The human civilization defeated the Vex Empire philosophically, by presenting an alternative vision of what a civilization could be. In doing so, humans forced one of the galaxy's greatest military powers to choose dissolution over continued atrocity. This represents one of the most significant contributions to galactic peace ever accomplished." The 7 minutes in history, the 7 minutes of silence on the diplomatic channel between Earth and the Vex, became one of the most studied moments in galactic history. Those 7 minutes represented the moment when the Vex Empire chose truth over deception, the moment when a civilization voluntarily ended 4,000 years of existence, the moment when the galaxy's understanding of conscience, responsibility, and redemption fundamentally changed, the moment when philosophy proved more powerful than military force. In those 7 minutes, the Vex Empire was transformed from a civilization of conquest into a civilization of redemption. The legacy: 1,000 years after the diplomatic channel went silent for 7 minutes, a monument was constructed in the region where the Vex Empire had once been strongest. The monument commemorated not military conquest or empire expansion, but the moment when a civilization chose to understand itself truthfully. The monument was built not by the Vex, but by the civilizations that the Vex had once destroyed, as a recognition that redemption, when genuine, could transform the meaning of atrocity. The monument became a pilgrimage site for beings across the galaxy seeking to understand how conscience could overcome such profound institutional evil. And at the center of the monument was a single plaque that read, "In 7 minutes, an empire kneeled." In that kneeling, the galaxy learned that the greatest power is the power to compel understanding. That the greatest strength is the strength to face truth. That the greatest civilization is one built on reconciliation rather than conquest.